The second bullet punched through her thigh, and she didn't scream. She was too busy pinning the young Marine to the floor, covering every inch of his body with hers. Blood pooled beneath them both. "Stay down," she ordered through clenched teeth. "That's an order, Marine." She didn't know his name. Didn't matter. 2 hours later, she'd open her front door to 60 soldiers in dress uniform standing at attention on her quiet suburban street. What they did next would break the internet. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The coffee was still too hot to drink. Rachel Torres wrapped both hands around the ceramic mug anyway, letting the heat bite into her palms. Pain she could handle. Pain was familiar. Pain meant she was still alive, still present, still anchored to something real after 14 hours of trying to keep other people that way. The booth's vinyl seat squeaked as she shifted her weight. Her scrubs were wrinkled, stained with evidence she didn't want to think about. A 34-year-old father of 2 had coded on her table that morning. She'd worked on him for 41 minutes. 41 minutes of compressions and drugs and desperate measures while his wife sat in the waiting room planning their anniversary trip. He didn't make it. They'd called time of death at 6:47 a.m., and Rachel had walked straight to the staff bathroom, locked the door, and pressed her forehead against the cold tile wall until her breathing steadied. Then she'd washed her hands, fixed her ponytail, and gone back to work. That was 9 hours ago. Now she sat in Maple Street Diner, 3 blocks from Memorial General Hospital, trying to remember what normal people did when they weren't watching strangers die. "More coffee, hon." Rachel looked up. Betty, the owner, stood beside her table with a pot in one hand and genuine concern in her eyes. 63 years old, silver hair pulled back in a bun, the kind of woman who remembered every regular's name and order. "I'm good. Thanks, Betty." "You look like you've been through it today." Rachel attempted a smile. "Long shift." "You work too hard." Betty topped off her mug anyway. "You need to find yourself a nice man, someone to take care of you for a change." "I'll add it to my to-do list." Betty patted her shoulder and moved on, and Rachel was grateful. Small talk required energy she didn't have. She raised the mug to her lips, blew across the surface, and that's when she noticed him. The young Marine sat at the counter 3 stools from the register. Desert camouflage, still dusty from wherever he'd been. A duffel bag rested against the counter leg. A slice of cherry pie sat untouched in front of him, his fork moving to his mouth in mechanical motions that had nothing to do with hunger. Rachel knew that look. She knew it because she'd worn it herself for 2 years after coming home from Iraq. The 1,000-yard stare. The way his eyes tracked every movement in the room without consciously registering any of it, the slight tension in his shoulders, the position of his hands, the invisible wall between him and everyone around him. He'd just come back from somewhere that changed you, somewhere that made a Tennessee diner feel simultaneously too bright and not quite real. Her leg ached, the old wound responding to memory the way it always did. 6 years since Fallujah, and her body still remembered better than her mind wanted to. She almost got up, almost walked over and said something. But what "thank you for your service" felt hollow. "I know what you're going through," felt presumptuous. "I was a Navy corpsman," felt like opening doors she'd spent 6 years trying to nail shut. So she stayed in her booth and let him eat his pie in peace. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a fellow warrior is give them space to figure out who they are now. At the counter, the Marine's fork scraped against the plate. The sound was too loud in the quiet diner, and he flinched slightly before catching himself. Rachel noticed. She noticed everything about him because part of her brain never stopped cataloging threats calculating exits, assessing situations. 6 years out of uniform, and she still couldn't turn it off. "You want anything else, sweetheart?" Betty had moved to the counter, addressing the Marine with the same warmth she showed everyone. "No, ma'am. Just the check." His voice was flat, distant. Rachel recognized that too. The vocal cords working independently of emotion because emotion was too expensive right now. "You just get back?" Betty asked. "Yesterday, ma'am." "Well, welcome home, son. Pie's on the house." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude he didn't know how to express. "Thank you, ma'am." "Betty. Everyone calls me Betty." "Thank you, Betty." Rachel took a sip of her coffee and looked away, giving him privacy. Her gaze drifted to the window, to the quiet street outside, to the ordinary Tuesday afternoon that existed beyond these walls. That's when the bell above the door chimed, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. 3 men walked in, and Rachel's body knew before her mind caught up. The lead man moved with military precision weapons, sweeping the room in a practiced arc. Behind him, 2 others spread out covering angles, blocking the exit. Ski masks, handguns, the coordinated entry of men who'd done this before, or at least the first one had. "Nobody move." The voice cut through the diner like a blade, calm, controlled, commanding. Rachel's hands had already released her coffee mug. Her body had already shifted forward in the booth, weight balanced, ready. 8 people in the diner. Betty at the counter. The young Marine on his stool. An elderly couple in the corner booth, the man's hand frozen halfway to his wife's. 2 construction workers near the jukebox, burgers forgotten. A teenage waitress by the kitchen door, face white with shock. And Rachel calculating distances, angles, threat levels. The second gunman was shaking. His weapon trembled in his grip barrel, wavering between targets. First-timer. Nervous. Dangerous in a different way than the leader. The third man's eyes were wrong. Pupils dilated, movements jerky and unpredictable. High on something. Meth, probably. The most dangerous of all because you couldn't predict what he'd do next. "Cash register," the leader commanded. "Now!" Betty didn't move. Couldn't move. Her hands had gone up automatically, the coffee pot still clutched in her right fist, and her body had locked in place. "I said now." The second gunman's finger twitched. The gun exploded, the sound impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Betty screamed. The elderly woman screamed. Acoustic ceiling tiles shattered, raining fragments down on the counter. The shot had gone wild, punching through the ceiling, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the chain reaction. The Marine moved. Rachel saw it happen in slow motion. Muscle memory. Overriding conscious thought. His hand reaching for his hip, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there because he wasn't in Afghanistan anymore. He was in Tennessee, in a diner, in a situation his body recognized, but his circumstances couldn't match. The third gunman, the one with the wrong eyes, saw the movement. His weapon swung toward the Marine. Rachel's brain performed calculations faster than conscious thought. 10 feet between her booth and the counter. 1.5 seconds until the shot. The Marine was going to die. This boy who'd survived his deployment, who'd made it home, who had a mother waiting for him somewhere, he was going to die, eating cherry pie, because his body remembered war better than it remembered peace. She was moving before the thought finished forming. "Get down!" The command voice exploded from her throat. The voice she hadn't used in 6 years. The voice that meant seconds mattered, and hesitation meant death. She hit him like a linebacker. Her full body weight drove him off the stool and onto the floor. She spread herself over him, making her body as wide as possible, covering him completely. The gun fired. Rachel felt the bullet before she heard it. A punch of heat through her right thigh, the same leg that carried shrapnel from Fallujah, the same leg that had survived one war only to be wounded in a diner in Tennessee. The bone shattered. Pain exploded through her nervous system, white-hot and overwhelming. She didn't scream, didn't cry out, didn't move off the Marine beneath her because she could feel him trying to push her away, trying to be the protector instead of the protected. "Stay down." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Don't be a hero. Let me do this." "You're hit. I said stay down. What's your name?" "Marine Derek." His voice shook. He could feel her blood soaking through his uniform. "Lance Corporal Derek Chen." "Well, Derek, you're going to be fine. I've got you." "Let me up. That's an order, Lance Corporal." The authority in her voice froze him. Beneath her, she felt his body go still. Blood pooled on the white tile floor, spreading in a dark red circle that grew impossibly fast. Rachel's hands gripped Derek's shoulders, holding him down with strength born of desperation and training. Across the diner, chaos erupted. The elderly man had surged to his feet, throwing his coffee cup at the nearest gunman. It struck the shaking one in the face, ceramic shattering hot liquid splashing. "Harold, no!" his wife screamed. But Harold wasn't listening. 72 years old Korean War veteran, and something had snapped in him when he saw Rachel take that bullet. "Get back, you coward!" he roared. "You want to shoot people? Shoot me! Leave the women alone!" The construction workers had overturned their table, using it as cover. One of them had his phone out, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. The leader was shouting orders, but his team had fractured. The nervous one was clutching his face where the coffee had scalded him. The high one was spinning in circles, weapon swinging wildly. "We need to go," the leader shouted. "Move! Move now!" But the high one wasn't listening. His weapon was tracking back toward Rachel and Derek, finger on the trigger, eyes seeing something that wasn't in the room. Rachel covered Derek more completely, pressing her face against his shoulder, making herself as small as possible while still shielding him. "If you feel me go limp," she whispered, "don't move until you hear sirens. Understand? I can't let you. Promise me." His voice cracked. "I promise." Rachel braced for the shot. It didn't come. The leader grabbed the high one's arm, wrenching the weapon toward the ceiling. "We're leaving. Now. Move." They ran. Through the kitchen, out the back door, into an alley where a car waited. Gone in seconds, leaving behind screaming witnesses and a woman bleeding on the floor. Rachel's grip on Derek loosened slightly. The adrenaline was fading and the pain was coming in waves now, each one stronger than the last. "Ma'am," Derek's voice was urgent. "Ma'am, they're gone. Let me help you." "Check the others first." "You're bleeding out." "Check the others first." Each word cost her something. "That's an order." Derek hesitated, then carefully rolled out from under her. He rose to his knees, scanning the room with trained efficiency. "The old man's okay. His wife's okay. Everyone's okay. No one else is hit." Rachel closed her eyes. Relief washed through her, warm and heavy and dangerous. "Good. That's good. Now let me help you. You know first aid. Combat trained, ma'am." "Then stop calling me ma'am and put pressure on the wound." Derek moved quickly, stripping off his camo jacket and pressing it hard against her thigh. Rachel sucked in a breath through her teeth. "Sorry," he said. "Don't apologize. Push harder." He did. The pain spiked, but so did her focus. Pain meant she was alive. Pain meant she was present. "What's your name?" Derek asked. "Rachel. Rachel Torres." "Rachel, I'm going to keep you talking, okay? That's what they taught us." "I know. I was a corpsman. 2 tours, Iraq." Derek's hands faltered for a fraction of a second. "You were Navy, combat medic. Same job, different branch." Why didn't you? He shook his head. Never mind. Stupid question. Ask anyway. Why did you do it? You didn't know me. You were about to make a reach for a sidearm you weren't wearing, Rachel said. I saw it. The gunman saw it. You'd have been dead before your hand hit your hip. Derek went quiet. His hands maintained pressure, but his jaw tightened. It's muscle memory, Rachel continued. Nothing to be ashamed of. How long have you been back? 36 hours. Then you're still in transition. Your body doesn't know it's home yet. My body almost got you killed. Your body almost got you killed. I made a choice. There's a difference. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Derek's shoulders relaxed. Slightly. EMS 2 minutes out, one of the construction workers called. He was still on the phone, voice shaking, but steady. They're saying keep pressure on the wound. Already doing it, Derek called back. Rachel's vision was starting to blur at the edges. Blood loss probably, or shock, or both. Hey, Derek's voice sharpened. Rachel, stay with me. I'm here. Keep talking. Tell me about Iraq. Rachel almost laughed. You want my war stories while I'm bleeding on a diner floor? I want you conscious. Talk about whatever keeps you awake. So she talked. She told him about FOB Falcon, about the medical tent where she'd saved 39 lives, about her commanding officer who called her ice because her hands never shook, about the dust and the heat and the endless nights when sleep felt like a betrayal of the men still fighting. She didn't tell him about Miguel. Not yet. That wound was older and deeper than the one in her leg. The paramedics arrived in a rush of activity. Derek stepped back but didn't leave his blood-soaked uniform, marking him as part of this story now. What happened? The lead EMT asked, already assessing Rachel's wound. Armed robbery, Derek said. 3 gunmen. She shielded me. Took a bullet meant for me. The EMT looked at Derek, then at Rachel, then back at Derek. She covered you. Completely. Didn't even hesitate. Something shifted in the EMT's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. What's your name, ma'am? He asked, cutting away the fabric around her wound. Rachel Torres. You military? Was. Navy corpsman. The EMT nodded, like that explained everything. Maybe it did. They loaded her onto the stretcher, and Rachel gripped Derek's hand as they wheeled her past. Call someone, she said. Someone who should know where you are. I will. And Derek? Her grip tightened. Don't carry this. You understand what happened today isn't on you. Ma'am, it was my choice, my honor. Don't take that from me. The ambulance doors closed between them. Derek stood in the parking lot, Rachel's blood still wet on his uniform, and tried to remember how to breathe. He'd been in firefights. He'd lost friends to IEDs. He'd held a dying sergeant's hand in a field hospital and told him his wife would be okay, even though neither of them believed it. But this. A woman he'd never met had thrown herself over his body and taken a bullet meant for his heart. Not because it was her job. Not because someone ordered her to, just because he was a Marine and she was a sailor, and that meant something even 6 years after she'd hung up the uniform. His phone felt heavy in his pocket. He pulled it out, stared at the screen. Captain Amanda Reyes, his CO. The woman who'd signed off on his leave, who'd told him to get his head right before coming back. He dialed. It rang twice. Lance Corporal Chen, you're supposed to be on leave. Ma'am, I need to report something. A pause. He could picture her at her desk, coffee, going cold paperwork piled high. What happened? A Navy corpsman. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "A nurse, ma'am. Former Navy. She threw herself over me during an armed robbery. Took a bullet meant for me. She's in surgery now." Silence on the line. The kind of silence that meant the other person was processing something they couldn't quite believe. "Say that again, Lance Corporal." "A stranger, ma'am. She didn't know my name. She saw the gunman aiming at me and she covered me. Made herself as wide as possible. Shielded me completely. The bullet hit her leg, shattered the femur. She wouldn't let me up until the gunmen were gone. Kept ordering me to stay down." "What's her name?" "Rachel Torres, former corpsman, 2 tours in Iraq." More silence. Then typing. Captain Reyes pulling up records, verifying. "Rachel Torres," the captain repeated. "FOB Falcon, 39 confirmed saves. Purple Heart for shrapnel wound sustained while treating wounded under fire. Honorable discharge, 2019. "Yes, ma'am." "And she's in surgery now." "Yes, ma'am. Memorial General Hospital. They're saying 6 to 8 hours minimum. Her femur's shattered in multiple places." Another pause. "Lance Corporal, I'm going to ask you something and I need an honest answer." "Yes, ma'am." "How are you holding up?" The question caught him off guard. He'd expected logistics details orders, not concern. "I don't know, ma'am." "That's honest." A beat. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay at that hospital. You're going to wait for her to come out of surgery. And you're going to be there when she wakes up. Because that's what we do for people who save our lives." "Yes, ma'am." "And Chen, ma'am. We take care of our own. Both branches. That woman is Navy, but she protected a Marine. That makes her one of us. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. I'm making some phone calls." The line went dead. Derek stared at his phone, not fully understanding what had just been set in motion. Captain Amanda Reyes made 7 phone calls in the next 30 minutes. The first was to Camp Lejeune. Her former XO, now a colonel, listened without interrupting. "You're telling me a former Navy corpsman threw herself over one of your Marines and took a bullet for him?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "And she didn't know him, never met him before. My guy says she calculated the shot in a second and a half and made the call. Full body shield. Kept him pinned until the threat cleared." "Jesus. Yeah. I'm passing this up the chain. This is the kind of story the Corps needs to hear." The second call was to Quantico, the third to Pendleton, the fourth to a buddy at Naval Station Norfolk, who still owed her a favor from Afghanistan. By the time she made the 5th call, the story was already spreading. An ex-Navy corpsman, 6 years out of uniform, throws herself over an active duty Marine she's never met, takes a bullet without hesitation, orders him to stay down while bleeding out on a diner floor. The story hit military Facebook groups within 90 minutes. Reddit's veteran forums within 2 hours. Someone found Rachel's service photos, her unit patches accounts from Marines she'd treated at FOB Falcon. "She saved my leg," one comment read. "IED 2017. She was in that tent for 6 hours working on me. Never met anyone steadier under pressure." "I remember her," another said. "We called her Ice, because nothing rattled her. Nothing." By hour 3, a Marine veteran in Texas had created a GoFundMe. Rachel Torres, Navy hero. It hit $50,000 before sundown. By midnight, it would pass $200,000. Hashtags started trending. Semper Fi Rachel. Warrior Nurse. Protect the Protectors. Across the country in VFW halls and American Legion posts in barracks and on bases, veterans were sharing the story. And they were making plans. Because in the military, there's a code. You don't leave your people behind. And you don't let them heal alone. Rachel Torres had no idea. She lay unconscious on an operating table. Dr. James Park, working with meticulous precision to reconstruct a femur shattered by a bullet meant for someone else, 6 titanium pins, 2 plates, 4 units of blood to replace what she'd lost on that diner floor. "She's got old shrapnel in this leg," Dr. Park said, studying the X-ray. "Military service, probably." "She was Navy," his surgical nurse said. "Corpsman, 2 tours." "You know her? She works in the ER. Best trauma nurse I've ever seen. Steadiest hands in the hospital." Dr. Park looked at the woman on his table. 34 years old. A warrior who'd hung up her uniform but couldn't hang up her instincts. Who'd seen a stranger in danger and done what warriors do. "Let's make sure she keeps this leg," he said. "She's earned it." In the waiting room, Derek Chen sat in a plastic chair, still wearing his blood-soaked uniform. The hospital staff had offered him scrubs. He'd refused. "It doesn't feel right," he told them. "Washing it off while she's fighting for her life." They'd nodded and left him alone. Betty arrived within the hour, her hands still trembling. She sat beside Derek without speaking, and they waited together. Harold and his wife came next. The old man's hand was bandaged where he'd cut it on the broken coffee cup. "How is she?" Harold asked. "Still in surgery." "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. And I've seen some things." Derek looked at him. "You served Korea, 1951. I was 18. Harold sat heavily in the chair across from Derek. "I've carried guilt for 70 years, son, for coming home when better men didn't. But watching that woman cover you like that..." He shook his head. "That's why we serve. Not for flags. Not for country. For the person next to us." 3 hours passed. Then 4. Then 5. People kept arriving, nurses from the ER, veterans who'd heard the story, and drove from 3 counties away. A news crew that Derek refused to speak to. At hour 6, Derek's phone buzzed. A text from Captain Reyes. "Sit tight. Help is coming." He didn't know what that meant. He wouldn't find out until morning. At 11:47 p.m. Dr. Park emerged from the surgical suite. Derek was on his feet immediately. She's stable. Surgery went well. We saved the leg." Dr. Park removed his surgical cap, running a hand through sweat-dampened hair. "She's going to need extensive physical therapy, but she should regain full function eventually." "Can I see her? She won't be conscious until morning." "I know. But can I see her?" Dr. Park studied Derek's face, the blood-stained uniform, the exhaustion, the guilt. "Room 412. Don't wake her." Derek took the elevator to the 4th floor and found her room. Rachel lay motionless, connected to machines that beeped and hummed in steady rhythm. Her leg was elevated, wrapped in bandages, supported by a complex arrangement of pillows and straps. Derek pulled a chair to her bedside and sat. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said quietly. "But I need to say this. I've survived things I shouldn't have survived. Lost people I shouldn't have lost. And I came home thinking maybe it didn't mean anything. Maybe there wasn't a point. But you..." His voice cracked. "You didn't know me. You didn't know my name. And you threw yourself over me like I was worth saving." He took a shaky breath. "I don't know how to carry that, ma'am. I don't know how to deserve it. But I promise you this, whatever you need, whatever it takes, I'm going to be there. Because that's what you taught me today. That's what you reminded me. We show up for each other. Even when it costs us everything." He stayed all night. When the sun rose, he was still there. And 2 hours later, everything changed. Rachel woke to fluorescent lights and the steady beep of monitors. Her mouth was dry. Her leg was on fire. and her first words, whispered through the fog of anesthesia, were about someone else. "The Marine he's fine." A face swam into focus. Dr. Park, smiling with relief. "Not a scratch on him. Thanks to you." Rachel closed her eyes, let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Good. That's good. Ms. Torres, you have visitors. Quite a lot of them, actually." There are 63 people in the waiting room asking about you, and a news crew camped outside. You're something of a celebrity." Rachel groaned. No interviews, no cameras. I'll pass that along. But there's one visitor who's been here all night. Says he's not leaving until he sees you awake." Rachel didn't have to ask who. Derek entered her room looking like he hadn't slept in 30 hours because he hadn't. "Ma'am, I told you to stop calling me that." "Old habits." He stood at the foot of her bed, uncertain. "How do you feel? Like someone shot me?" "That's fair." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "The doctor says you're going to be okay. Full recovery eventually." "Good." Silence stretched between them, the kind of silence that holds too many words. "I called my CO last night," Derek said finally. "Told her what you did." "You didn't have to. She made some phone calls. Rachel, there are veterans outside. Marines, sailors, Army Air Force. They drove through the night to be here." Rachel stared at him. "What?" "And there's more coming. People are donating money, sharing your story. The hashtag's trending." He pulled out his phone, showed her the screen. $200,000 in 12 hours for you. Rachel couldn't process it, couldn't make the numbers mean anything real. "I just did what anyone would do," she said. "No." Derek's voice was firm. "You did what warriors do, and warriors don't forget their own." Before Rachel could respond, there was a knock at the door. A nurse poked her head in. "Ms. Torres, there's a phone call for you. Someone named Maria Santos. Says it's important. Says she's been looking for you for 6 years." Rachel's heart stopped. Maria Santos. Miguel's mother. "I'll take it," Rachel whispered. And in that moment she understood that what happened in that diner wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Rachel's hand trembled as the nurse placed the receiver against her ear. 6 years. 6 years of running from this moment, and now it had found her in a hospital bed with a shattered femur and no way to escape. "Hello? Rachel Torres." The voice was older than she remembered, but unmistakable. Warm, gentle, carrying an accent that brought back memories Rachel had buried so deep, she'd forgotten where she put them. "Mrs. Santos." "Maria, please. You saved my son's friends. You held him when he died. You can call me Maria." Rachel's throat closed. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "I've been looking for you," Maria continued. "For 6 years, mija. After you left the Navy, you disappeared. No forwarding address, no social media, nothing. I thought I'd never find you." "I'm sorry." The words came out broken. "I'm so sorry. I should have—" "Stop. Don't apologize. I'm not calling to make you feel guilty. I'm calling because my son left something for you, and I've been carrying it for 6 years waiting for the chance to deliver it." Rachel's heart stopped. "What? A letter. Miguel wrote it 3 days before that last patrol. He gave it to me with instructions. If something happens to me, find Rachel Torres. Make sure she reads this." Those were his exact words. Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. "I saw you on the news this morning," Maria said. "Saw what you did for that young Marine. And I knew. I knew my son chose the right person to trust with his final words. Mrs. Santos, Maria, I couldn't save him. I tried everything and I couldn't. I know, mija. I know exactly what happened. Miguel's commanding officer told me. You ran into burning wreckage. You worked on him for 8 minutes while everyone else was screaming at you to get out. You held him while he died. You were the last face he saw." Rachel was sobbing now. Ugly, heaving sobs that she couldn't control. "That's not failure, Rachel. That's love. That's what Miguel would have wanted, to not die alone. You gave him that gift. Now let me give you his." "I don't deserve—" "That's not your decision to make." Maria's voice was firm now. Maternal. The voice of a woman who had buried her only child and somehow found the strength to keep living. "I'm flying to Tennessee today. I'll be there by evening, and I'm bringing you my son's letter whether you think you deserve it or not." The line went dead. Rachel stared at the ceiling, tears streaming into her hair, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Something she'd kept locked away for 6 years. Derek appeared in the doorway. He took one look at her face and crossed the room in 3 quick strides. "Rachel, what happened?" "Who was that?" "A ghost," Rachel whispered. "A ghost I've been running from since 2019. She told him about Miguel, not the sanitized version, not the official report, the real story, the one she'd never told anyone. She told him about the pact they'd made, both going home opening a restaurant together. About Miguel's dream of authentic Puerto Rican cuisine, and how he'd cook for the whole unit on special occasions, somehow turning military rations into something that tasted like love. She told him about the night before that last patrol, when they'd sat outside the barracks and talked about futures that felt impossibly far away. Miguel had shown her pictures of the building he wanted to rent, a little place in San Juan, right on the water. "Torres and Santos," he'd said. "Best food in the Caribbean. What do you think?" "I think you're dreaming," she'd told him. "That's the point, Ice. You've got to dream, or what are we fighting for?" She told Derek about the IED, about running toward the burning vehicle while everyone screamed at her to stop, about finding Miguel pinned under twisted metal, his legs crushed, blood everywhere. She told him about Miguel's last words. "Tell my mom I wasn't scared. Tell her I thought about her cooking." And then she told him the part she'd never said out loud, the part that had haunted her for 6 years. He died 50 seconds before the medevac arrived. 50 seconds. If I'd been faster. If I'd done something different. If I'd... "Stop." Derek's voice cut through her spiral. "Rachel, stop. You did everything right." "I didn't save him." "Some wounds can't be saved. You know that. You're a trauma nurse. You know that better than anyone. Knowing it and believing it are different things." Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that hit her like a punch to the chest. "Is that why you threw yourself over me, because you couldn't save him?" Rachel looked at him. Really looked at him. 23 years old. Eyes that had seen too much. Hands that had done things he'd never talk about. "I threw myself over you because you were about to die," she said. "Because I saw the shot coming and I knew I could stop it. That's all. That's everything." "But would you have done it if Miguel had lived, if you didn't carry that guilt?" The question hung in the air between them. "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "And that terrifies me." Before Derek could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, footsteps, the squeak of shoes on linoleum. The door burst open and Betty rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. "Rachel, honey, you need to see this. You need to see what's happening outside." "Betty, I can't exactly walk to the window right now." "Then I'll tell you. There are Marines out there. Dozens of them. And they're not alone. Navy, Army, Air Force. They're setting up in the parking lot. Someone's directing traffic. They've got a whole command structure going." Rachel stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "They're organizing, honey. They heard what you did, and they're organizing. I heard one of them say something about a proper homecoming. Whatever that means." Derek's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. "What?" Rachel asked. "What is it?" "It's from Captain Reyes. She says to tell you to rest up. She says—" He swallowed hard. "She says the whole Corps is coming." The weight of those words settled over Rachel like a blanket she didn't know she needed. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I'm not even a Marine. I was Navy. Different branch. Different uniform," Derek interrupted. "Same oath. Same code. You protected one of ours. That makes you one of ours. Forever. That's how this works." Rachel closed her eyes. The pain in her leg was nothing compared to the pain in her chest. But this pain was different. This pain felt like healing. Hours passed in a blur of doctors and nurses and tests. They adjusted her medication, checked her vitals, changed her bandages. Dr. Park stopped by twice, pleased with her progress but concerned about her emotional state. "You need to rest," he told her. "Your body's been through major trauma. Stress will slow your recovery." "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." "I've been told." By late afternoon, Rachel had dozed off despite herself. The medication pulled her under, and she dreamed of sand and heat, and Miguel's laugh echoing across a dusty compound. She woke to the sound of soft crying. A woman sat in the chair beside her bed. Small. Dignified. Silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands clutched a weathered envelope like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Maria!" Maria Santos looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. "Hello, mija. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "How long have you been here?" "An hour, maybe 2. The young Marine Derek, he let me in. He's a good boy. You saved a good boy." Rachel tried to sit up and winced as pain shot through her leg. "Don't move." Maria was on her feet, instantly adjusting pillows, smoothing blankets. "You're hurt. Rest." "I've been resting all day." "Then rest some more. You've earned it." Rachel looked at the envelope in Maria's hands. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Is that Miguel's letter?" "Yes." Maria sat back down, still holding it carefully. "I've read it. I hope you don't mind. I needed to know what my son wanted to tell you." "What does it say?" Maria smiled a sad and beautiful smile that held 6 years of grief and love and acceptance. "It says you need to forgive yourself. It says you did everything right. It says—" Her voice broke, and she took a moment to compose herself. "It says he knew he might not come home. And if that happened, he wanted you to know that it wasn't your fault, that you were the best friend he ever had, and that you need to keep being the person who runs toward danger because the world needs more people like you." Rachel couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this woman who had lost her only child and somehow found the strength to bring comfort to the person who couldn't save him. "May I read it?" Maria placed the envelope in Rachel's hands. "It belongs to you now. It always did." Just Rachel opened it with trembling fingers and pulled out a single sheet of paper, worn soft from years of handling. Miguel's handwriting, messy, energetic, alive, covered the page. "Ice. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. That's okay. Don't cry. I know you're crying. Stop it. That's an order. I want you to know something important. Whatever happened, however it went down, it wasn't your fault. I know you. I know you're already blaming yourself. I know you're replaying every second looking for the moment you could have changed things. Stop. You did everything right. You always do. That's who you are. That's why I trust you with this letter. Here's what I need you to do for me. Don't stop being ice. Don't let what happened make you soft or scared or small. The world needs people who run toward the fire when everyone else is running away. You're one of those people, maybe the best I've ever known. Keep saving lives. Not because you owe me, but because it's what you were born to do. I've watched you work. I've seen miracles happen under your hands. Don't waste that gift. Find someone to love, someone who deserves you, someone who'll make you laugh the way I always tried to. Don't be alone, Rachel. You're too good for that. And finally tell my mom I wasn't scared. Tell her I thought about her cooking. Tell her I loved her every single day, even when I didn't say it. We'll meet again someday, Ice. Until then, keep fighting, keep saving, keep running toward the fire. Semper Fi. I know it's Marine talk, but it fits your brother in everything that matters, Miguel. Rachel read it twice, 3 times. Each time something loosened in her chest. Something that had been wound tight for 6 years. He knew, she whispered. He knew he might not come home. He was a realist, Maria said. He loved his country enough to die for it, but he wasn't naive about the risks. He made peace with the possibility before every patrol. That letter was his way of making peace with you, too. Rachel clutched the paper to her chest like a lifeline. I've carried guilt for 6 years, she said. Every patient I lost felt like losing him again. Every life I saved felt like trying to make up for the one I couldn't. And now, Rachel looked at this woman, this mother who had every right to hate her, to blame her, to demand answers she couldn't give, and saw only compassion. Now I don't know. I feel like something's broken open, like I'm bleeding in a way that isn't physical. Maria took her hand. Her grip was warm and strong, and exactly what Rachel needed. That's not breaking, mija. That's healing. Sometimes you have to open the wound before it can close properly. You've been carrying this infection for 6 years. Now it's draining. It will hurt for a while, but you'll be better for it. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun set outside the window. Maria told stories about Miguel as a child, his first attempts at cooking, the disasters that followed, the determination that never wavered. He burned water once, Maria laughed. I still don't know how that's possible, but he managed it. He made us arroz con pollo at FOB Falcon, Rachel said, with military rations. I don't know how he did it, but it tasted exactly like home. That was his gift, making something beautiful out of nothing. Around 8 o'clock, Derek knocked softly on the door. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you both need to see. He helped Rachel into a wheelchair against Dr. Park's orders, but she didn't care, and pushed her to the window at the end of the hall. What she saw stole her breath. The hospital parking lot had transformed. Tents had been set up. Generators hummed. Tables covered with food stretched across the asphalt. And everywhere, there were veterans. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. They'd come from across the state, from neighboring states, from as far as California and Maine. Word had spread through networks, both official and unofficial, and they had answered. Signs dotted the crowd. Thank you, Rachel. Semper Fi. Warriors never forget. They've been arriving all day, Derek said quietly. More every hour. They're not leaving until they see you, until they thank you properly. Rachel couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. Maria squeezed her shoulder. You see, mija? You see what you did? Not just for Derek, for all of them. You reminded them what it means to serve. Down in the parking lot, someone started singing. The Marines' hymn, low and steady, spreading through the crowd like a wave. Then another song layered over it, anchors away, the Navy voices joining in. Then the Army song. Then the Air Force. 4 branches. 1 voice. Rising up to the window where Rachel sat crying in her wheelchair. I don't deserve this, she whispered. You're wrong, Derek said. You've always been wrong about that. But starting tomorrow, we're going to show you just how wrong you are. Rachel looked at him. What do you mean? Get some sleep tonight. Because at 0600, the whole world is going to know your name. And I don't think you're ready for what comes next. Derek wheeled her back to her room. Maria helped her into bed, tucking the blankets around her with maternal care. "I'll be back in the morning," Maria promised. "We have more to talk about." Miguel left instructions, not just the letter, other things he wanted you to have. "What things?" Maria smiled mysteriously. "Tomorrow, mija. Rest now." Rachel lay in the darkness long after they left Miguel's letter clutched against her chest. Outside her window, she could hear the veterans still singing, their voices carrying through the night like a promise. She thought about this woman she'd been 6 years ago, broken, guilt-ridden, convinced she'd failed the person who mattered most. She thought about the woman she'd become, harder, colder, keeping everyone at arm's length, because losing someone again felt impossible to survive. She thought about the woman she might be after all this, whoever that was. And for the first time in 6 years, that thought didn't terrify her. The singing continued until well past midnight. Rachel listened to every note, letting the sound wash over her like absolution. She slept deeply, dreaming not of explosions and blood, but of a little restaurant on the water in San Juan. Miguel stood behind the counter, grinning that impossible grin of his. "What do you think, Ice Torres and Santos? Best food in the Caribbean?" "I think you're dreaming," she told him. "That's the point. You've got to dream, or what are we fighting for?" She woke at 5:47 a.m. to the sound of boots. Not running. Not chaotic. Perfectly synchronized. The sound of military precision. The sound of something big about to happen. Rachel's heart began to race. The door opened. Derek stood there in his dress uniform, looking like a different person than the haunted young man she'd covered with her body 2 days ago. "It's time," he said. "They're ready for you." "Ready for what?" He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Your homecoming." Rachel gripped the armrests of the wheelchair so hard her knuckles went white. "I can't go out there like this," she said. "I'm in a hospital gown. My hair's a mess. You look like a warrior who just took a bullet for a stranger," Derek interrupted. "That's exactly how you should look." "Derek, I'm serious. There are hundreds of people down there, maybe thousands. I can't." "You can." His voice was gentle but firm. "You've done harder things than this. You've run into burning vehicles. You've performed surgery under mortar fire. You can handle a crowd of people who want to say thank you." Rachel's hands were shaking. Not from pain, the medication handled that. From something deeper, something she couldn't name. Maria appeared in the doorway holding a garment bag. "I thought you might need this," she said. "I had it sent overnight." She unzipped the bag, and Rachel's breath caught. It was her dress uniform. Navy whites, the one she'd packed away 6 years ago and never looked at again. The medals were still pinned to the chest: Purple Heart Combat Action Ribbon, Navy, and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. "How did you—" "Your sister," Maria said. "Julia. I called her last night. She found it in your closet. She said you kept it, even though you told her you'd thrown it away." Rachel stared at the uniform. 6 years of memories pressed into fabric and brass. "I can't wear that. I'm not Navy anymore. I gave that up." "Mija." Maria crossed the room and took Rachel's face in her hands. "You never gave it up. You took off the uniform, but you never stopped being what it represents. What you did in that diner proved that. Now let these people honor you the way you deserve to be honored." "But Miguel would want you to wear it. You know he would." That was the argument that broke her. 30 minutes later, Rachel sat in her wheelchair wearing dress whites for the first time in 6 years. A nurse had helped her with her hair. Maria had adjusted her medals until they sat perfectly straight. Derek had polished her shoes, even though no one would see them under the blanket covering her legs. "You ready?" Derek asked. "No," Good. That means you're human. He smiled. Let's go. They wheeled her through the hospital corridors, and everywhere they passed, people stopped. Nurses, doctors, patients, visitors. They pressed against the walls to let her through, and some of them were crying. "Thank you," one elderly woman whispered as Rachel passed. "Thank you for reminding us what courage looks like." Rachel didn't know what to say. She nodded awkwardly and kept her eyes forward. The elevator ride down felt like it lasted forever. Rachel's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her shattered thigh. "What exactly is going to happen?" she asked. Derek and Maria exchanged a look. "You'll see," Maria said. The elevator doors opened. The hospital lobby was packed wall to wall with veterans. They stood at attention as she emerged, hundreds of them in dress uniforms, medals, gleaming faces, solemn and proud. Rachel couldn't breathe. A path had been cleared through the center of the lobby leading to the main entrance. As Derek pushed her wheelchair forward, the veterans on either side snapped to salute. One by one, row by row. A cascade of raised hands following her progress through the crowd. Rachel's eyes blurred with tears. She tried to return the salutes, but her hand was shaking too badly. "Don't try to salute," Derek murmured. "Just let them honor you. That's all you have to do." They reached the main entrance. The doors slid open, and Rachel saw what waited for her outside. The parking lot had been transformed into something she couldn't comprehend. Thousands of veterans stood in formation, perfect rows, stretching as far as she could see. At the front, a color guard held flags from every branch of service. Behind them, a military band waited in silence. But that wasn't what stole Rachel's breath. It was the street beyond the parking lot. Her street. Somehow impossibly, they had blocked off the entire road leading to her house 3 blocks away. And lining that road were more people, civilians this time. Neighbors, strangers, families with children holding handmade signs, an entire community waiting to welcome her home. "What is this?" Rachel whispered. "This is what happens when warriors take care of their own," Derek said. "This is your homecoming, Rachel. The one you never got when you left the Navy. The one you deserved then and you damn sure deserve now." A woman in Marine Corps dress blues stepped forward from the formation. Her bearing screamed command authority. Her face held the kind of hard-won wisdom that only comes from years of service. "Ms. Torres, I'm Captain Amanda Reyes. We spoke on the phone." "Captain." Rachel's voice came out steadier than she expected. "I don't understand what's happening." "What's happening is simple. 6 years ago, you left the military and disappeared. No ceremony. No recognition. No one to thank you for your service. You just faded away, and that was wrong." Captain Reyes moved closer, her voice dropping. "What you did in that diner reminded all of us what the uniform really means. Not the fabric, not the medals, the commitment, the willingness to sacrifice for strangers. You embodied everything we're supposed to be." "I was just doing my job." "Your job ended 6 years ago. What you did 2 days ago wasn't obligation. It was character." Captain Reyes turned and raised her voice. "Attention." 5,000 veterans snapped to attention as one. The sound was like thunder. "Present arms." 5,000 hands rose in salute. Rachel finally broke. Tears streamed down her face, dripping onto the whites of her dress uniform. She managed to raise her own hand, trembling, but determined, and held the salute as long as she could. "Order arms!" The salutes dropped. Captain Reyes turned back to Rachel. "Now, let's take you home." The procession began. Derek pushed Rachel's wheelchair down the center of the parking lot, while the military band struck up "Anchors Aweigh." The Navy anthem rolled over the crowd, and Rachel heard voices joining in, thousands of them, singing words she hadn't heard in 6 years. She passed faces she didn't recognize, veterans of wars she'd never fought, men and women who had answered the call for reasons that had nothing to do with knowing her personally. "Why?" she asked Derek over the music. "Why would they come all this way for someone they've never met?" "Because that's what we do," he said simply. "Because you're one of us. Because you proved it when it mattered." They reached the street, and the crowd parted to let them through. Neighbors she'd barely spoken to in 3 years of living here pressed forward to touch her hand. "We're so proud of you," one woman said, tears streaming down her face. "We had no idea. 3 years you've been living next door, and we had no idea who you were." An elderly man in a VFW cap stepped into her path. His eyes were wet, but his voice was strong. "Korea, 1952. I've waited 70 years to see courage like yours again. Thank you for showing an old man it still exists." Rachel took his hand. "Thank you for your service, sir." "No, ma'am. Thank you for yours." The procession continued. 3 blocks felt like 3 miles. Every face she passed carried a different story. Gratitude, respect, shared understanding. These people knew what she'd done because they'd done similar things themselves, or because they'd never had the chance and wished they had. Finally, they reached her house, and Rachel stopped breathing entirely. Her small suburban home had been transformed. American flags lined the walkway. A banner stretched across the front porch, "Welcome home, warrior." Flowers covered every surface, roses, lilies, carnations in red, white, and blue. But it was what waited on the porch that destroyed her. 47 people stood in formation in front of her house. Men and women of various ages, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes, all watching her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Captain Reyes moved to stand beside her wheelchair. "Do you know who these people are, Ms. Torres?" Rachel shook her head, unable to speak. "These are the Marines you saved in Iraq. The ones you treated at FOB Falcon. Every single one of them who could travel is standing right here. They've been tracking you for 6 years, hoping for a chance to say thank you. When they heard what happened at the diner, they chartered 3 planes to get here." Rachel stared at the faces. Some of them she recognized. Others had changed too much in 6 years. But as she looked closer, she began to see them, the young men and women who had passed through her medical tent, bleeding and broken and terrified. They were whole now. Healthy. Alive. Because of her. A man stepped forward from the group. Mid-30s, built like a linebacker, walking with a slight limp. He stopped in front of her wheelchair and dropped to one knee. "Sergeant Marcus Williams, ma'am. You saved my leg on July 15th, 2018. The doctors at Landstuhl said it was the best field surgery they'd ever seen. They said if you'd made one wrong cut, I'd have lost it." Rachel remembered him. A roadside bomb, shrapnel everywhere. She'd worked on him for 4 hours in 100-degree heat while mortars fell around them. "Marcus," she whispered, "I remember. I have 3 kids now, ma'am. They exist because you gave me a future. I need you to know that." He rose and stepped back. Another person took his place. A woman this time. Younger. Thin scar running down her left cheek. "Corporal Jennifer Hayes. You pulled me out of a burning Humvee when everyone else had given up. The fire was everywhere. You burned your hands getting me out. I saw the blisters afterward." Rachel looked at her own hands. The scars had faded, but they were still there if you knew where to look. "Jennifer, you had internal bleeding. I almost lost you twice. But you didn't. You refused to let me die. I'm a mother now, ma'am. I named my daughter Rachel. I hope you don't mind." One by one, they came forward. 47 people. 47 stories. 47 lives she'd saved, and then tried to forget. A young man who'd lost both legs to an IED, now a Paralympic athlete. A woman who'd been shot through the abdomen, now a nurse herself. A Marine who'd coded 3 times on her table, now a grandfather. Each one brought something. A photo. A medal. A handwritten letter. Small gifts that represented enormous debts. By the time the last person stepped back, Rachel was sobbing openly. Maria held her hand. Derek stood guard behind her wheelchair. And 47 people she'd saved stood witness to a moment 6 years overdue. Captain Reyes approached again, holding a folded flag. "This is for you, Ms. Torres. A flag flown over the Capitol building in your honor. Congressman Martinez arranged it personally after he heard your story. He's a veteran, too. He wanted you to have this." Rachel accepted the flag with trembling hands. "There's one more thing," Captain Reyes said. She gestured to someone in the crowd. A moment later, a young woman approached, maybe 25, carrying a small wooden box. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Chen," Captain Reyes said. "Derek's sister." Rachel looked at Derek, startled. "You have a sister?" "I do. She's the reason I joined the Corps," followed in her footsteps. Derek's voice was thick with emotion. She wanted to present this herself. Lieutenant Chen opened the wooden box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a Navy cross. "This was my grandmother's," Sarah Chen said. "She served as a Navy nurse in Vietnam. She saved 63 lives during the Tet Offensive. She passed away last year, but she left instructions that this medal should go to the next great Navy nurse." She paused, tears streaming down her face. "I think she'd want you to have it." Rachel couldn't accept it. Couldn't even think about accepting it. "I can't take your family heirloom. It belongs to someone who earned it," Sarah Chen interrupted. "That's what my grandmother would say. And you earned it, Ms. Torres. In that diner. On a Tuesday afternoon. You earned everything we're giving you today, and more." She pressed the box into Rachel's hands and stepped back. Rachel sat in her wheelchair, surrounded by thousands of people who had come to honor her, holding a flag in one hand and a medal in the other, and finally understood something she'd spent 6 years refusing to believe. She wasn't broken. She wasn't a failure. She was exactly who she was supposed to be. Captain Reyes's voice cut through the moment. "Ms. Torres, there's one final piece of business." She checked her watch. "In approximately 2 minutes, a helicopter is going to land in that field across the street. On that helicopter is someone who wanted to meet you personally, someone who flew through the night to be here." Rachel looked up, confused. "Who?" Before Captain Reyes could answer, the sound of rotors filled the air. A military helicopter appeared over the tree line, descending toward the open field. The crowd parted, creating space for it to land. The helicopter touched down. The door opened, and the Secretary of the Navy stepped out. Rachel's heart stopped. The secretary, a silver-haired woman in her 60s named Admiral Patricia Morrison, walked across the field with purpose and authority. The crowd fell silent. Even the children stopped moving. She stopped directly in front of Rachel's wheelchair. "Petty Officer Torres." Rachel tried to salute, but the flag and medal box made it impossible. Admiral Morrison waved her off. "At ease. You've done enough saluting for one day." The Admiral's face softened. "I watched the security footage from that diner. I've watched it 6 times now. What you did in those 3 seconds, the calculation, the commitment, the complete disregard for your own safety. That was the finest example of naval values I've seen in my 30-year career. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. Admiral Morrison reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. By order of the President of the United States for extraordinary heroism in the face of armed assailants for voluntarily placing yourself between a fellow service member and hostile fire, and for conduct that reflects the highest traditions of the naval service, you are hereby awarded the Navy Cross. Rachel couldn't process what she was hearing. Ma'am, I'm not active duty. I've been out for 6 years. I don't think the President disagrees. So do I. So does everyone here. Admiral Morrison opened the box, revealing the distinctive blue and white ribbon of the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor in the Navy. This isn't about what uniform you wear, Petty Officer Torres. It's about what you carry in your heart. And what you carry is pure warrior spirit. She pinned the medal to Rachel's dress whites right next to the purple heart she'd earned in Fallujah. Welcome back to the family, Admiral Morrison said quietly. We never should have let you disappear in the first place. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, the thunder of thousands of people celebrating a moment that transcended politics and branches and everything else that usually divided them. Rachel sat in her wheelchair, 2 Navy crosses now pinned to her chest, one earned in combat, one borrowed from a dead hero, and felt something shift inside her. The guilt didn't disappear. The memories didn't fade. Miguel's face still haunted the edges of her consciousness. But alongside all of that, something new had taken root. Hope. Maria appeared at her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Miguel would be so proud of you right now, she whispered. So proud. Rachel clutched Miguel's letter in her pocket. She'd kept it with her through the entire ceremony, and let the tears come. I miss him, she said. Every day. I miss him so much. I know, mija. I miss him too. Maria kissed her forehead. But he's here. He's always been here. And now because of what you did, his spirit gets to keep saving lives through you. The crowd began to sing. The Navy hymn this time, voices rising in the afternoon air. Eternal Father strong to save, whose arm hath bound the restless wave. Rachel closed her eyes and listened. The music wrapped around her like a blanket carrying 6 years of pain and guilt and isolation away. She wasn't alone anymore. She had never been alone. She'd just forgotten how to see the people standing beside her. When the hymn ended, Captain Reyes leaned in close. There's a reception inside your house. Food, drinks, people who want to shake your hand. But if you need a break first, just say the word. We can clear everyone out for an hour. Rachel looked at her house. At the flowers, the flags, the evidence of love she'd spent years convinced she didn't deserve. No, she said. I'm ready. Derek pushed her wheelchair up the walkway through the crowd of people who reached out to touch her shoulders and whisper thanks. They entered her house, her small, quiet house that had been empty for so long, and found it filled with life. Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen, veterans of every generation, neighbors and strangers, and people who had traveled across the country to be here, all of them waiting for her, all of them smiling. Rachel took a deep breath. Okay, she whispered. Let's do this. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The trial was coming. The gunman who had shattered her leg and changed her life would stand before a judge. And what happened in that courtroom would set events in motion that no one could have predicted. But for now, surrounded by warriors, Rachel Torres finally allowed herself to believe. she was one of them. 8 months later, Rachel walked into the courtroom without her crutches. The limp was still there, would always be there. But she'd trained herself to minimize it, to move with purpose instead of pain. Physical therapy 3 times a week for 6 months had rebuilt muscles the bullet had destroyed. The titanium pins in her femur had become part of her now metal and bone fused together into something stronger than either alone. Derek sat in the front row behind the prosecution table. Maria beside him. Betty from the diner. Harold, the Korean War veteran who'd thrown his coffee at the gunman. 43 of the 47 Marines she'd saved in Iraq had made the trip, filling the gallery with dress uniforms and hard stares. The defense attorney had objected to their presence. Intimidation, he'd argued. My clients can't receive a fair trial with an army of soldiers glaring at them. The judge had overruled him. They're here as supporters of the victim council. That's their right. Rachel took her seat at the witness stand and looked across the courtroom at the 3 men who had changed her life. Victor Kane sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his military bearing still visible despite 8 months in county jail. His face was unreadable, but his eyes tracked Rachel's every movement. Beside him, Darnell Sims, the nervous one whose twitching finger had fired the first shot, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His leg bounced constantly under the table. His lawyer kept putting a hand on his arm to still him. Marcus Webb, the one who'd been high on methamphetamine, was barely recognizable. 8 months of forced sobriety had stripped away the jittery energy Rachel remembered. In its place was something hollowed out. Empty. Ms. Torres. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Angela Martinez, approached the stand. Can you describe for the court what happened on the afternoon of March 15th? Rachel had rehearsed this testimony a dozen times. She knew every word she was supposed to say, but looking at the 3 men who had shot her, something shifted. I was in Maple Street Diner, she began. I'd just finished a 14-hour shift at the hospital. I was tired. I wanted coffee and silence. And what happened next? 3 men entered the diner. They were armed. The first one, she nodded toward Victor Kane, gave orders, military precision. The second one was shaking, nervous. His weapon was trembling. And the third, Rachel looked at Marcus Webb. He was high. I could see it in his eyes. Dilated pupils, erratic movements, unpredictable. What happened when they entered? The nervous one, Darnell Sims, fired accidentally. The shot went into the ceiling. Everyone panicked. And then, Rachel paused, steadying herself. Then I saw the third man swing his weapon toward a young Marine sitting at the counter. Lance Corporal Derek Chen. Yes, Derek was reaching for his hip. Muscle memory. He'd just come back from deployment. His body was reacting to a threat the way it had been trained to react. But he didn't have a weapon. He was going to die. What did you do? I calculated the distance, about 10 feet. I knew I could reach him before the shot. So I did. You threw yourself over him. Yes. Completely covering his body with yours. Yes. And that's when you were shot. Rachel touched her thigh unconsciously. Yes. The bullet went through my femur, shattered the bone in 3 places. Did you let go of Lance Corporal Chen? No. Even after being shot? No. I held him down until the threat was neutralized. That's protocol. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. No further questions. The defense attorney rose. His name was Thomas Blackwell, a public defender with 30 years of experience and a reputation for aggressive cross-examination. Ms. Torres, you were a Navy corpsman, correct? Yes. Trained in combat medicine? Yes. Would you say you're trained to make split-second decisions under pressure? Yes. So when you saw the gunman aiming at Lance Corporal Chen, you made a calculation. I did. A calculation that resulted in you being shot instead of him. Yes. Blackwell paused, letting the word hang in the air. Ms. Torres, were you trying to be a hero? Rachel met his eyes steadily. I was trying to save a life. That's my job. That's always been my job. But it wasn't your job that day, was it? You weren't on duty. You weren't in uniform. You were a civilian drinking coffee. The job doesn't end when you take off the uniform, Mr. Blackwell. You should know that. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge gavelled for silence. Blackwell tried another angle. Ms. Torres, isn't it true that you carry significant guilt over the death of a fellow service member in Iraq? Rachel's blood ran cold. Objection, the prosecutor said immediately. Relevance. Goes to state of mind, Your Honor. The witness's motivations are central to understanding what happened in that diner. The judge considered for a moment. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Counselor. Blackwell turned back to Rachel. Petty Officer Miguel Santos. He was your friend, wasn't he? Yes. He died in Iraq, in your arms according to the reports. Yes. And you've carried guilt over his death for 6 years. Rachel's hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair. In the gallery, Maria Santos leaned forward, her face tight with concern. I've processed that guilt, Mr. Blackwell, with help from people who care about me. But at the time of the shooting, you hadn't processed it. In fact, you'd spent 6 years running from it, isolating yourself, refusing to form connections. What's your point? My point, Ms. Torres, is that when you threw yourself over Lance Corporal Chen, you weren't making a rational calculation. You were acting out of unresolved trauma. You were trying to save the person you couldn't save 6 years ago. The courtroom went silent. Rachel felt the words hit her like physical blows. Because part of her, the part she'd spent months in therapy trying to understand, knew there was truth in them. Mr. Blackwell, she said slowly, let me tell you what I was thinking in those 3 seconds. Please. I was thinking that a young man who had survived deployment was about to die eating cherry pie. I was thinking that someone somewhere was waiting for him to come home. I was thinking that I could stop it. She leaned forward. I wasn't thinking about Miguel. I wasn't thinking about guilt or trauma or any of the things you want to use to muddy the waters. I was thinking about Derek Chen, about keeping him alive. That's it. That's all. But you want to know if my past influenced my decision? Probably. Everything we've lived through influences everything we do. But that doesn't make my choice less valid. It makes it more. Because I knew what it felt like to lose someone. I knew the weight of that grief, and I refused to let Derek's family carry it if I could prevent it. She looked directly at Victor Kane as she said the next words. I made a choice. A clear, conscious choice. I chose to protect a stranger with my body. Your clients made choices too. They chose to walk into that diner with guns. They chose to threaten innocent people. They chose to fire weapons at unarmed civilians. Her voice hardened. Don't you dare try to make my choice sound like confusion while defending theirs as reasonable. The gallery erupted, veterans on their feet applauding. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this court. It took 2 full minutes to restore silence. Blackwell, visibly shaken, retreated to the defense table. No further questions. The prosecutor rose for redirect. Ms. Torres, one final question. If faced with the same situation again, knowing what you know now about the injury you'd sustain, would you make the same choice? Rachel didn't hesitate. Every time. Without question. Every single time. The prosecution rested. What happened next changed everything. Victor Kane asked permission to address the court. His lawyer tried to stop him. Victor, this is not advisable. Anything you say, I know what I'm saying, Tom. I know exactly what I'm saying. The judge studied him for a long moment. Mr. Kane, you understand you're under no obligation to speak. I understand, Your Honor. And you understand that anything you say can be used against you in sentencing. I understand. The judge nodded. Proceed. Victor Kane rose from the defense table. He was tall, broad-shouldered, still carrying himself with military discipline, despite the orange jumpsuit. He turned to face Rachel directly. Ms. Torres, I owe you an apology. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. I was Army, 8 years, 2 deployments. Honorable discharge turned dishonorable after I got caught stealing equipment to sell for drug money. Lost everything. My career, my pension, my self-respect. He took a breath. When I planned this robbery, I told myself it was just money. Nobody would get hurt. In and out, quick and clean. I'd done worse things in combat zones. This was nothing. His voice cracked slightly. Then your friend's gun went off, and everything spiraled. Marcus was high-swinging his weapon everywhere. I saw the Marine at the counter reach for his hip, and I knew what was about to happen. I knew Marcus was going to shoot him. He looked at Rachel with something like wonder. And then you moved. Faster than I've ever seen anyone move. You covered him completely. Made yourself as wide as possible. Took the bullet meant for his heart. Victor's eyes were wet now. I've seen combat, Ms. Torres. I've seen men do extraordinary things under fire. But I've never seen anything like what you did. Not for a brother in arms. Not for a fellow soldier. For a complete stranger. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. When I saw you go down, saw the blood, I ran. Not because I was scared of getting caught. I ran because I remembered what I used to be. What the Army trained me to be. And I couldn't stand the contrast between who you were and who I'd become. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'm pleading guilty. To all charges. Armed robbery. Assault with a deadly weapon. Everything. I don't want a trial. I don't want my lawyer to try to reduce my sentence. I want to face the consequences of what I did. Blackwell was on his feet. Your Honor, my client is clearly emotional. He needs time to— Sit down, Tom. Victor's voice was sharp. I'm done hiding behind excuses. He looked at Rachel one last time. Ma'am, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that what you did in that diner, it reminded me who I was supposed to be. Who I still could be, maybe if I put in the work. He sat down heavily. The courtroom remained frozen. Rachel found her voice. Mr. Kane. He looked up. It's never too late to find your way back. Something broke in Victor Kane's face. A wall he'd been holding up for years crumbled, and for a moment he wasn't a criminal in an orange jumpsuit. He was a soldier who had lost his way and finally found the courage to admit it. The judge called a recess. When court resumed an hour later, Victor Kane formally changed his plea to guilty on all counts. Darnell Sims followed suit. His lawyer tried to negotiate, but Darnell shook his head. I've been having nightmares for 8 months, he said. Every night I see her blood on that floor. I hear her telling that Marine to stay down. I can't live with this anymore. I need to pay for what I did. Marcus Webb was the last. The drugs had done too much damage. He barely seemed to understand what was happening. But when asked how he pleaded, he whispered, Guilty. I'm guilty. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Victor Kane received 22 years. He stood straight as the judge delivered the verdict, accepting it without flinching. Darnell Sims received 15 years reduced due to his cooperation and genuine remorse. Marcus Webb received 18 years with mandatory drug rehabilitation. Rachel attended every day of the proceedings. When the sentences were delivered, she felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Relief. It was over. The legal part, at least. Now came the harder work, the work of building something from the wreckage. After the final sentencing, as the courtroom emptied, a man approached Rachel. Mid-50s, expensive suit, an air of authority that suggested money and influence. Ms. Torres, my name is Robert Chen. I'm Derek's father. Rachel shook his hand. Mr. Chen, Derek's mentioned you. I wanted to thank you personally for saving my son's life. He paused. I also wanted to discuss something with you. A proposition. What kind of proposition? I run a foundation. Veterans Affairs. Medical support, housing assistance, therapy coverage. We help about 200 veterans a year with the resources we have. He met her eyes. With your story, your credibility, your connections, we could help thousands. I want you to consider letting us create the Rachel Torres Foundation for Wounded Warriors. Rachel stared at him. Mr. Chen, I'm a nurse. I'm not a public figure. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You don't have to know. You just have to lend your name, your presence, your story. We'll handle the rest. He pressed a business card into her hand. Think about it, please. What you did in that diner, it moved people. It reminded them what sacrifice looks like. That kind of inspiration is rare. It shouldn't be wasted. He walked away, leaving Rachel holding a card that felt like it weighed more than the titanium in her leg. That night, Rachel sat in her living room, the same living room that had been empty for 3 years before the diner and had been full of life ever since. Derek occupied the couch across from her, eating leftover lasagna from one of the dozens of casserole dishes that still arrived weekly from veterans groups. Maria sat in the armchair by the window, knitting something that might become a scarf, or might become a disaster. She'd never been good at knitting, but she found it soothing. So, Derek said between bites, my dad talked to you. He did, and Rachel turned the business card over in her hands. He wants to name a foundation after me. I know, he's been planning it for months. He just needed the trial to be over first. Why didn't you tell me? Derek shrugged. Wasn't my place. Besides, you needed to focus on recovery, on healing. The foundation thing that's about the future. You weren't ready for the future until you dealt with the past. Maria looked up from her knitting. He's right, Mija. 8 months ago, you couldn't have handled this. You were still carrying too much, but now, she smiled. Now you're ready. Ready for what? To be who you were always meant to be. Not just a nurse, not just a former corpsman. Something more. Maria set down her knitting. Miguel saw it in you. He wrote about it in his letter. Keep running toward the fire, he said. This foundation, it's a new fire. A way to keep saving lives even when you're not in the room. Rachel read Miguel's letter again. She'd memorized every word by now, but she still pulled it out whenever she needed to hear his voice. Keep being the person who runs toward danger. The world needs more people like you. Okay, she said finally. Derek sat up. Okay? Okay, I'll do it. The foundation. Whatever your father wants. Derek grinned the same grin he'd had in his official Marine photo before deployment had stolen it away. He's going to be thrilled. There's a condition. Name it. Rachel looked at him steadily. I want you to run it with me, not as my assistant, as my partner, co-director. Equal say in everything we do. Derek's grin faded into something more serious. Rachel, I'm not qualified for. You're qualified because you understand. Because you've been where these veterans are. Because you know what it feels like to come home and not know who you are anymore. She leaned forward. I can't do this alone, Derek. I don't want to. You're the reason any of this happened. You should be part of what comes next. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his fork and extended his hand. Partners. Rachel shook it. Partners. But Maria beamed at them both. Miguel would be so happy right now, so proud. Rachel touched the letter in her pocket. I know, I can feel it. The Rachel Torres Foundation for Wounded Warriors launched 3 months later. Initial funding, $2.1 million, raised primarily through the viral attention following the trial. First-year projections help 200 veterans. Actual first-year results, 412. But that was just the beginning. Because Rachel had another idea. An idea born from that moment in the diner when 3 seconds of calculation had saved a life. I want to teach people, she told Derek one evening. Not just veterans, everyone. How to react when violence happens. How to stay calm. How to protect themselves and others. Like a self-defense class. Bigger, a whole program, active shooter response, emergency medical basics, the psychology of crisis situations. She pulled out a notebook filled with scribbled plans. I've been thinking about this for months. Most people freeze when violence happens. They don't know what to do. Their brains can't process it fast enough. But that can be trained. That instinct can be built. Derek studied her notes. You want to teach civilians to do what you did? I want to teach civilians that they can do what I did. That courage isn't something you're born with. It's something you practice, something you prepare for. You really think people would sign up for that? Rachel smiled. I think after everything that's happened, people are ready to stop being bystanders. I think they're ready to learn how to show up. 6 weeks later, the first Guardian Response class met in a community center. 30 participants, a mix of ages, backgrounds, professions. All of them there because they'd heard Rachel's story and wanted to be prepared if their moment ever came. Rachel stood at the front of the room, her leg aching, but her voice strong. Welcome to Guardian Response. I'm Rachel Torres, and I'm going to teach you how to save a life. 30 faces looked back at her. 30 people who might never face a crisis like the one she'd survived, or who might face something worse tomorrow. The most important thing I can teach you isn't tactics, she said. It's this: you are capable of more courage than you think, more sacrifice than you imagine, more love than you've ever shown. She paused, letting the words sink in. All you have to do is choose it. Let's begin. 5 years to the day. Rachel stood at the window of her office watching students file into the community center across the street. 50 of them today, the largest class yet. Word had spread through veteran networks, through church groups, through corporate training programs. Guardian Response had grown from a single classroom in Tennessee to 14 cities across the country. Her leg ached. It always ached on anniversary days. The titanium pins seemed to remember even when her mind tried to forget. Derek appeared in the doorway. You ready? They're waiting. Give me a minute. He nodded and disappeared. Rachel pulled Miguel's letter from her pocket. The paper had grown soft from years of handling the creases worn nearly through. She didn't need to read it anymore. Every word was carved into her memory, but holding it steadied her somehow, connected her to something larger than this moment. 5 years, Miguel, she whispered. Can you believe it? The letter didn't answer. It never did. But Rachel had stopped needing answers a long time ago. Now she just needed the reminder. She tucked the letter away and headed downstairs. The community center was packed, not just with students. At the back of the room, a cluster of familiar faces had gathered. The annual reunion had become tradition. Everyone who could make it came back on this day to remember, to reconnect, to remind themselves why they'd started this journey in the first place. Betty sat in the front row, her silver hair now completely white, her eyes still sharp. She'd retired from the diner 2 years ago, but she still showed up to every class Rachel taught. "Someone's got to keep you honest," she always said. Harold, the Korean War veteran, sat beside her. 82, now using a cane, but refusing to miss this day. "I've got maybe 5-6 anniversaries left in me," he'd told Rachel that morning. "I'm not wasting a single one." Maria Santos had flown in from Puerto Rico. She came every year bringing photos of Miguel that Rachel had never seen before. Each anniversary brought new stories, new memories, new pieces of a friendship that death had interrupted, but couldn't destroy. And surrounding them, scattered throughout the crowd, were the 47 Marines Rachel had saved in Iraq. Not all of them could make it every year. Lives happened. Jobs, families, the ordinary complications of existence. But today, 39 of them had come. 39 people who existed because Rachel Torres had refused to let them die. Derek stepped up beside her. "Big crowd. Biggest yet." "Nervous," Rachel smiled. "When have you ever known me to be nervous? I was there when Admiral Morrison pinned that Navy Cross on you. Your hands were shaking so bad I thought you'd drop the flag." "That was different. That was public. This is family." Derek looked out at the crowd. "Family's gotten pretty big." "Yeah, it has." She walked to the front of the room and the chatter fell silent. 50 students sat ready with notebooks and pens. Behind them, the reunion crowd settled into their seats. Even after 5 years, the moment still felt sacred somehow. The intersection of strangers and survivors of past and future, of the woman Rachel had been, and the woman she'd become. "Welcome to Guardian Response," she began. "My name is Rachel Torres. Some of you know my story. Some of you don't. Either way, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about what you're going to do when your future arrives." A hand went up immediately. Young woman, mid-20s, fierce determination in her eyes. "Yes. Ms. Torres, were you scared in that diner?" Rachel had been asked this question hundreds of times. The answer never changed. "Terrified. I thought I was going to die. I thought the bullet would hit something vital, and I'd bleed out on that floor." She paused. "But I was more afraid of what would happen if I didn't move. More afraid of watching that young Marine die when I could have stopped it." How do you push through that fear? You don't push through it. You carry it with you. Fear isn't the enemy. Paralysis is. Fear tells you something matters. It tells you the stakes are high. The skill isn't eliminating fear. It's acting despite it. Another hand, older man, maybe 60, wearing a Marine Corps baseball cap. "Ma'am, I served 3 tours in Vietnam. Came home broken. Spent 40 years thinking I was done being useful. Then I heard your story and signed up for this program." His voice cracked. "I want to know if it's too late. If someone my age can still make a difference." Rachel walked toward him. The crowd shifted to let her pass. "What's your name?" "William." "William Hayes." "William, when was the last time you did something that scared you?" He thought about it. "This morning, walking through those doors." "Why was it scary?" "Because I spent 40 years hiding from who I used to be. Coming here meant admitting I still wanted to be that person." Rachel put her hand on his shoulder. "That's your answer. You're already pushing through fear. You're already acting despite it. Age doesn't determine courage. Choice does." William's eyes were wet. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until I run you through the active shooter drill. Then we'll see how grateful you feel." The room laughed. The tension broke. Rachel returned to the front, and launched into the curriculum. Crisis psychology, threat assessment, emergency medical basics. The same material she'd taught 1,000 times, but it never felt routine. Every class was someone's first exposure to these ideas. Every class was someone's chance to become the person they'd always hoped they could be. 2 hours later, the students took a break. Rachel stepped outside to catch her breath. Maria found her there, leaning against the building, watching clouds drift across the Tennessee sky. Big day, mija. Every anniversary is a big day. This one feels different, though. Bigger, somehow. Rachel nodded. 5 years. It doesn't seem possible. Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like another lifetime. Maria stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You know what Miguel would say if he were here? Probably something ridiculous. Something about opening a restaurant in that parking lot. Maria laughed. Torres and Santos. Best food in the Caribbean. He never gave up on that dream even at the end. I know. He talked about it constantly. Did he ever tell you the real reason? Rachel turned to look at her. What do you mean? Maria's eyes were soft with memory. The restaurant wasn't about food, mija. It was about home. Miguel grew up poor. We moved constantly. He never had a place that was truly his. The restaurant was supposed to be that place, somewhere permanent, somewhere people could come back to year after year and know it would always be there. She gestured at the community center behind them. You built it, Rachel. Not the restaurant he imagined, but the home he wanted. A place people come back to. A place that will always be here. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. I never thought of it that way. Miguel did. He knew you'd figure it out eventually. Maria took her hand. The letter he left you. The part about running toward fire. He wasn't just talking about emergencies. He was talking about this. Building something. Showing up for people. Making a home out of courage. Before Rachel could respond, Derek burst through the doors. Rachel, you need to come inside. Now. Something in his voice made her heart stop. She followed him back into the building, Maria close behind. The crowd had gathered around a television mounted on the wall. News footage played showing a scene of chaos. People running. Police cars. Flashing lights. What happened? Derek pointed at the screen. Pharmacy robbery in Louisville. 3 gunmen. They took hostages. Rachel watched the footage, her stomach turning to ice. The scene was horrifyingly familiar. The panic. The confusion. The freeze that happens when violence arrives without warning. One of the hostages got them out, Derek continued. 9 people. Led them to the back room, locked the door, called 911. Everyone survived. Who? Derek's face broke into a smile. Ashley Martinez. She was in your 2nd class. 4 years ago. Rachel stared at the screen. A young woman was being interviewed, a blanket around her shoulders, tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady. I heard her voice in my head, Ashley was saying. Miss Torres, from Guardian Response. She taught us that freezing is a choice, that we can choose differently. So when the guns came out, I didn't freeze. I acted. The reporter asked, what made you sign up for that program? Because I saw what Rachel Torres did in that diner 5 years ago. I saw a woman throw herself over a stranger and take a bullet for him. And I thought I want to be capable of that. I want to know I could be that person if I ever needed to be. Rachel couldn't breathe. 4 years ago, Ashley Martinez had been 21 years old, fresh out of college, unsure of her place in the world. She'd sat in Rachel's classroom and asked dozens of questions, scribbled notes in a spiral notebook, practiced emergency procedures until her hands stopped shaking. Now she'd saved 9 lives. Because Rachel had taught her she could. The room erupted. Veterans hugging each other. Students crying. Maria gripping Rachel's arm so tightly it almost hurt. "You see," Maria whispered. "You see what you've built." Rachel couldn't speak. She watched Ashley Martinez on the screen, this young woman who had turned Rachel's worst day into someone else's miracle, and felt something shift inside her chest. For 5 years she'd told herself she was just doing her job, just showing up, just going through the motions of a life she'd stumbled into by accident. But this wasn't accident. This was legacy. Every class she taught, every student she trained, every person who walked through those doors carrying fear and walked out carrying capability. They were all connected, all part of something larger than any individual moment. Miguel had been right. Running toward fire wasn't just about emergencies. It was about building a world where more people were ready to run when their moment came. The broadcast ended. The room fell quiet. Everyone looked at Rachel, waiting for her to say something. She walked to the front of the room, her leg aching, her heart full. 5 years ago, she began. I made a decision in 3 seconds that changed everything. I threw myself over a stranger because I couldn't stand the thought of watching him die. I didn't know it would lead to this. I didn't know I'd be standing here 5 years later, surrounded by people who feel like family, watching one of my students save 9 lives on national television. She looked at the faces before her. Betty and Harold. Maria. Derek. The Marines she'd saved in Iraq. The students who had come to learn what she'd learned the hard way. I used to think courage was something you were born with, something you either had or you didn't. But I was wrong. Courage is a skill. It's a choice you make over and over again, every time you face something that scares you, every time you show up when it would be easier to stay home. She pulled Miguel's letter from her pocket and held it up. A friend wrote me this letter 6 years ago. He died 3 days later. He told me to keep running toward fire. He told me the world needs more people like that. Her voice steadied. He was right. And Ashley Martinez just proved it. And every single one of you, everyone in this room, you're proving it too. Every time you show up here, every time you practice, every time you refuse to accept that freezing is the only option. She tucked the letter away. So here's what I want you to remember when you leave today. You don't need to be special. You don't need to be fearless. You don't need to be a Navy corpsman or a Marine or any kind of warrior at all. You just need to decide right now that when your moment comes, you'll show up. She looked at William Hayes, the Vietnam veteran, who'd walked through those doors terrified. You'll show up, she repeated. Even when you're scared. Even when it costs you something. Even when you're not sure you're capable. You'll show up anyway. The room was silent. Not uncomfortable silence. Sacred silence. The kind that follows words that land exactly where they need to land. Derek stepped forward. Rachel, there's one more thing. The foundation hit a milestone this week. We didn't want to say anything until today. What milestone? He pulled out his phone, showing her a number. 10,000, he said. That's how many veterans we've helped since we started. 10,000 people who got medical care, housing assistance, therapy, job training. 10,000 lives changed. Rachel stared at the number. 10,000. And the training program, Derek continued. 12,000 graduates across 14 cities. We've documented 6 confirmed saves. 6 people who are alive because someone in your program knew what to do when violence arrived. 6 saves. 6 human beings who existed because Rachel Torres had refused to be a bystander. That's your legacy, Derek said. That's what 5 years built, and it's just the beginning. Maria stepped forward, holding something wrapped in blue velvet. I have one more thing. Something I've been saving. She unwrapped the velvet, revealing a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in silk, was a medal Rachel didn't recognize. Miguel was awarded this posthumously, Maria said, for his service in Iraq, for the lives he helped save before he died. I've kept it for 6 years waiting for the right moment to give it away. She pressed the box into Rachel's hands. He would want you to have it. You were his partner, his friend, his sister in everything that mattered. You've honored his memory every single day since he died. This medal, it belongs to both of you now. Rachel looked at the medal, looked at Maria, looked at the room full of people who had become her family over 5 impossible years. And finally, she let go. Not of the memory, not of the grief, but of the idea that she had to carry it alone. The idea that her story was one of failure instead of transformation. Miguel had died in her arms. Nothing would ever change that. But he'd also lived in her heart for 6 years, guiding her toward this moment, toward the legacy they'd built together, even though only one of them was still breathing. "Thank you," she whispered to Maria. Then louder to the room, "Thank you, all of you, for showing up, for believing in something bigger than yourselves, for reminding me every single day why any of this matters." She held the medal against her chest right next to the Navy Cross she'd earned in that diner 5 years ago. Miguel used to say, "You've got to dream," or "What are we fighting for?" I think he was right. But I'd add something to that. You've got to show up. For yourself. For strangers. For the people who need you, even if they never know your name. She straightened her shoulders, the old habit of military bearing rising to the surface. Class dismissed. Go out there and be the person someone needs when their world falls apart. Be the one who shows up. Always show up. The room erupted. Not applause this time. Something deeper. People rising to their feet, crossing the space to embrace each other, to embrace Rachel, to hold on to this moment before it slipped away into memory. Derek reached her first, pulling her into a hug that lasted longer than usual. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saving my life, for giving me purpose, for being my partner in all of this. Thank you for letting me." Maria was next, her small frame surprisingly strong as she held Rachel tight. "Miguel is so proud of you, mija. I feel it. Every day I feel it." "I know. I feel it too." The Marines lined up to shake her hand one by one. 47 lives she'd saved in Iraq. 39 of them here today. Each one a story. Each one a miracle. Betty squeezed her hands. "You're the best thing that ever happened to that diner, even if you did ruin our floor." Harold snapped a crisp salute. 70 years since Korea. You're the finest soldier I've ever met, and I don't care that you were Navy." The students approached shyly, asking for photos, for handshakes, for advice they'd remember for the rest of their lives. Rachel gave them everything she had, every ounce of attention, every word of wisdom, every moment of presence, because that's what warriors do. They show up. Completely. Every single time. Hours later, when the crowd had finally dispersed and the community center had emptied, Rachel sat alone in the quiet. Her leg ached. Her heart was full. Miguel's letter rested in her pocket, warm against her hip. Derek appeared in the doorway. "Everyone's gone. You ready to head out?" Rachel looked around the room. The chairs where 50 students had sat that morning. The walls covered in photos from 5 years of classes, graduations, reunions. The flag that Admiral Morrison had presented to her, framed and mounted by the door. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." She stood, the familiar pain shooting through her thigh. The limp was more pronounced now after hours on her feet, but she'd stopped minding it years ago. This scar is proof I was where I needed to be. She walked out the door, Derek at her side. The Tennessee evening wrapped around them warm and quiet. "Same time tomorrow?" Derek asked. "Same time tomorrow." They parted at the parking lot. Rachel drove home through streets she'd come to know over 5 years of living in this community. Past the hospital where she still worked 3 days a week. Past the diner where everything had started. Past the lives she'd touched and the lives that had touched her back. She pulled into her driveway and sat for a moment, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. 5 years. She'd thrown herself over a stranger and taken a bullet for him. She'd nearly died. She'd been reborn, and somewhere along the way she'd built exactly what Miguel had dreamed of all those years ago. A home. A place where people came back. A legacy that would outlast her, carried forward by everyone she'd trained and everyone they'd save. Rachel got out of the car and walked to her front door. The same door where 60 veterans had stood at attention 5 years ago. The same door where her life had changed forever. She put her hand on the knob and paused. "Thank you, Miguel," she whispered into the evening air, "for believing in me, for making me promise, for being right about everything." She opened the door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. But it wasn't empty. The walls held photos of 5 years of memories. The shelves held medals and awards she'd never asked for, but had learned to accept. The refrigerator still received weekly deliveries from veterans who wanted to make sure she was eating. She wasn't alone anymore. She had never really been alone. She'd just needed to learn how to see the people standing beside her. Rachel Torres sat down in her favorite chair, pulled Miguel's letter from her pocket, and read it one more time. The familiar words washed over her like a blessing. "Keep running toward fire. The world needs more people like you." She folded the letter carefully and tucked it away. Then she picked up her phone and started planning tomorrow's class. Because that's what warriors do. They show up. Always.